I wanted to talk today about Tony Packer, who died a week ago Friday in upstate New York, in the Finger Lakes area.
Do you know how old? She was quite old.
She was 86. Tony Packer, I have always been a big admirer of Tony Packer. She was born in 1929 in Germany and spent the war in Switzerland, and then came to the United States and began studying Zen with Philip Kapleau and became his senior student. And in the late, well, I guess it was in the mid-70s, Kapleau decided to take an extended leave of absence from the Zendo, his Zendo, I think it was in Rochester, and put Tony Packer in charge. And in the course of the next few years, she made a number of very interesting and significant changes in the way things were done. She wasn't really interested in the Japanese aspects of Zen. And of course, if you'll remember, Philip Kapleau had a big falling out with Yasutani about the Japanese aspects of Zen. And she also got rid of her rakusu and refused to acknowledge any distinction between teacher and student. And when Philip Kapleau returned in 1981, he was somewhat dismayed. And so she left that Zendo and went about, I think it was about 60 miles south, and opened up her own retreat center. But she gave up Zen. She declined even to call herself a Buddhist. She was only interested in the Dharma, and she devoted her life to it without service. She was, I suppose, Philip Kapleau's Joko Beck.
Yeah.
But I've always admired Tony Packer because I came across her early in my Zen studies and thought that she had a remarkable ability to clearly communicate what she was talking about. And I read quite a few of her books. She's published about 3 or 4 that I know of. And I really recommend them all. They're quite good. In fact, we may even do one here in the book club. Because until she died, I had pretty much forgotten her. Because she did not teach Zen, and she did not teach it in a Zen manner. Her Dharma in a Zen manner. It was a uniquely Western expression, we might say, of the Dharma. In commemoration of her death, Tricycle Magazine put up a quote from Tony Packer on its Daily Dharma. And they, if you search Tricycle, they always give a reference to the article from which the quote was taken. And this is the short article that she wrote. I don't know when she wrote this, probably sometime in the 90s, I bet. And I read it, and I was absolutely blown away by this very first sentence. Awareness cannot be taught, and when it is present, it has no context. Awareness is a word that she very carefully chose, because in the course of her career, she had occasion to talk about the difference between consciousness and awareness and what we now refer to as mindfulness. Early in her career, it was attention, but later in her career, it became mindfulness. The awareness of which she is speaking is not mindfulness. It's different from mindfulness. And I thought that you might be interested to hear about what the differences are. You know, words are just words. They can be used to mean anything, really. And one of the problems that we continuously encounter in this practice has to do with vocabulary. It has to do with the fact that we use words in ways that they're not normally used. You know, when we talk to each other, we have sort of a tacit understanding of the words that we use between ourselves or among ourselves. And one of the things that we go through whenever we join a new organization or a new group of people for any purpose is to learn the vocabulary and to learn what it is that people are referring to when they use certain kinds of words. And in this sentence, she uses the word context, and this is part of the context. I'm reading right now a book by Mark Epstein called The Trauma of Everyday Life, in which he talks about, in the very first chapter, he talks extensively about the difficulties that he had when he first came to Zen practice. And the difficulty was that the way in which they used words and used them in a paradoxical way, that he had a lot of trouble adapting to that. And that really resonated with me because I had exactly the same problem when I came to Zen. You know, we talk about emptiness and we talk about consciousness, and we talk about awareness, we talk about mindfulness. All of these words can be interpreted so many different ways and used so many different ways. I can tell you the different ways in which Tony Packer used these words. Consciousness is sort of the all-encompassing activity of the mind. I mean, consciousness contains a self. It also contains just about everything else that the self encounters. Consciousness is about comprehensive thought. It's about memories, it's about projections, it's about deliberations, it's about wishes, it's about disappointments. It contains everything that the mind is capable of thinking. At least that's the way that Tony Packer uses that word. Mindfulness has always been defined as paying attention. You know, when I sharpen a tool downstairs, I do it in a very mindful way because it has to be sharpened in a very careful and exact manner. Brushing your teeth requires a certain kind of mindfulness. in this practice, mindfulness has taken on another aspect. And that is what we do when we sit zazen. We talk about mindfulness. And mindfulness is simply observing the thoughts that arise in your mind and then making no judgment, letting go of them. It's a practice. But as Tony Packer pointed out, mindfulness still contains a self. It's still about you doing something. You are present. And as a matter of fact, in a lot of Zendos, the practice of mindfulness can be quite problematic. Because when a student is exhorted to be mindful, which I have done myself, it creates a self-consciousness. It also creates an aspect of competition. Well, is my mindfulness as good as that other person's mindfulness? Am I doing this right? Am I not doing it good enough? You see? So, when we talk about practice, we're automatically creating a dualism. The same thing happens, according to Seke Harada, with what we call shikantaza. You know, when we ask a student to do nothing but shikantaza, just sit. Just sit. Here's what he says about this. Therefore, when those teachers say that you should not have a goal and tell people to just do shikantaza, which is just sit single-mindedly, the problem is that the person who hears that instruction perceives just or sit single-mindedly, and in this way he or she practices zazen within the thought of shikan, or just sitting. By doing this, the person will never become one with shikan. To do this kind of zazen means it will never come to completion. That there is no completion means that Zen and sitting will never disappear. It's a condition in which you were attached to Zen. You cannot be free of it. As long as anything like sitting or Zen or practice exists, even in the slightest degree, you will never be able to find true satisfaction.
Is that, who's that? That Tony Packer?
No, this is Harada.
Oh.
He's talking about shikantaza. But Tony Packer was making the same point with respect to mindfulness, being mindful. Now, awareness for Tony Packer is something that you finally get to after you've done shikantaza until you are bored out of your mind, literally, and you lose that aspect of self. You see? Awareness contains no self. Awareness is just the doing of whatever it is you're doing. You know, I can go downstairs and I can work at my bench, and I can completely lose myself in what I'm doing. I mean, my universe shrinks through that microscope to an area about the size of a grain of rice. And I become one with that little bit of space and the tool that I am operating with.
Positive samadhi is what she's talking about?
Well, it's not just positive samadhi, it's also absolute samadhi. Because when you're doing shikantaza, or when you're practicing mindfulness on your cushion, you can slip into a kind of awareness which is all-encompassing and has no focus. You know, positive samadhi is all about focus. when I am downstairs, I am very focused. Literally, my microscope is focused. But when you're doing shikantaza up here on your cushion, that has no focus. So the kind of awareness that she's talking about is indescribable. It has no definition, and it cannot be captured by words. Now, when I was thinking about all this, you know, my first reaction to all this was, well, then what are we doing here? I mean, not only is there nothing to teach, it's impossible to teach it. I mean, it's sort of like a kid standing in front of a refrigerator. And did you ever do this? You know, you open up the refrigerator and peek around the edge of the door to see if you can watch the light come on. And you never are able to see that. It's almost like, and so we say, of course, that the light is always on. It's like Schrodinger's cats, which is a principle in physics that, you know, can't tell whether the cat's alive or dead inside the box. But, I mean, Zen practice is very much like that. Zen teaching is very much like that. Because, what's the point? It has no point. So why are we so devoted to this chase after awareness? Now, even phrasing the question that way betrays the answer, doesn't it? Yeah. Because we want to say that there's a purpose, that there's a reason for doing everything, that there is some sort of a goal towards which we are progressing or not progressing. When in fact, there is no goal, and there cannot be any goal. Because as long as you're pursuing a goal, there is no awareness.
Isn't that this up here, whether it may start with a goal in the mind, and unintentionally it's the unraveling of that goal, and one day you can think you see that light going on in the refrigerator, and then maybe try it again. But it's that unraveling of the goal, of all of that, the attachment to a goal and a reason. And it works the same for me at my bench. You were talking about being very focused. Yes, I start very focused, and at some point it transcends that, the work. Yeah, that was clear.
Well, it's as clear as anything else around here. Elihu Smith, who is a Dharma heir of Joko Beck, wrote an article in Tricycle not too long ago talking about, you know, the purpose of Zen, or the purpose of Zazen. And I can't remember the quote exactly. I wish I had it in front of me, but he said the opening line of this is that, you know, Zazen is absolutely useless, therefore we must do Zazen. And that's absolutely correct. Because if we go at it with any kind of a purpose, we're automatically defeated. And if we try to talk about this practice in terms of benefits, which we continuously do, particularly with people who are new to the practice and are wondering why they're going through all this pain and suffering, you know, we have to make that concession. We have to sell out, basically. There's no way around it. And I find this to be so interesting because this is really the intersection between the relative and the absolute. Until you begin to understand and to realize that the relative and the absolute are two sides of the same thing. It's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. Just getting to that realization is worth the price of admission. But see, I even attach a monetary value to it.
It must be true.
So that's the goal.
There's no way to talk about any of this. There's no way to talk about any of it.
Well,
I can't tell, now every time I say to somebody to be mindful or to practice mindfulness on the cushion, you know, I'm betraying myself, in a sense. But on the other hand, I'm not. I'm being expedient. I'm doing what has to be done. You know, the fact that I'm sitting here giving this Dharma talk is beside the point. Thanks.
Can I answer a question?
Sure.
What about colon study when it takes up half of your life? What is the purpose?
It doesn't have one.
I rest my case.
It does not have a purpose.
Because I think I would rather be up here sitting just for no good reason.
Well, then do that.
I knew you were going to say that.
Well, do that. I mean, that's why we, you know, they talk about, well, Harada in this book. This book, by the way, is a very good book. You ought to read this book.
what's it called?
The Essence of Zen. I mean, he talks about this. He talks about the problem with shikantaza, which I just quoted from. And then he has a section called the problem with koan study. The problem with koan study is a bit more obvious, of course. It has everything to do with ego and self and, you know, achievement and, you know, the passing of a test. It's totally deleterious to this practice. You know, I don't encourage anybody to do it.
On the other hand,
On the other hand,
it's extremely useful as a practice.
it is, and I spent many years of my own life doing the whole syllabus. So, and I loved every minute of it.
Yourself.
Well, I don't know, it's very interesting, isn't it? At least we're being upfront about all this, or trying to be. Okay.